afternoon. How are you today on this liquid sunshine-filled day? So we thank you all for coming. I'm Leatrice Elsie. I am the Interim Executive Director at the Hammonds House Museum, and we are extremely excited to see a full house here for this very special lecture with Carrie Mae Weems. So we're going to get right into the lecture, but we do have to take care of a little bit of housekeeping first. So I'd like to bring to the stage our board of directors, the chairman of our board, Imara Kennedy.
Good afternoon. Okay, now come on, it's Super Bowl Sunday. Good afternoon. I know the Falcons aren't in it, but that's okay because we're here today, so that's what we're celebrating. It is indeed my honor on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Hammonds House Museum to welcome you to this wonderful, wonderful occasion. First of all, I would be remiss if we just didn't take a moment and give a round of applause. How about 30 years of this great institution? And we celebrate that so proudly because, you know, as we watch the landscape of what's happening across our country, many institutions focused on African American art and culture, unfortunately, these days are closed. And what we like to say at Hammonds House Museum is not only are we open, but we are very widely open and ready for you to come and see all of the great exhibitions that we have for the next 30 years. I just want to take a moment and just do some quick thank yous, and on that note, I'd be remiss also to not recognize, you know, in this 30-year history, there have only been 2 executive directors for this institution, which is phenomenal, because for some institutions, you know, it's a rotating door. So, of course, I first want to recognize a mentor, dear friend, and our founding executive director, Mr. Ed Spriggs. Ed is who gave me the okay, you know, it's okay to be cool and wear a hat. So, and then, of course, it kind of seems a little weird to say this now because she's had a year of this now, but our recently retired executive director, Ms. Myrna Anderson Fuller. These great leaders really set the foundation for us to be where we are today. So Ed and Myrna, we thank you so much for your tireless service. Yes, please, thank you. And then, of course, as many know, that the Hammonds House Museum, like the National Black Arts Festival and a few others, were actually initiative of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners through the Fulton County Arts Council. And I kind of serve 2 hats today as a current member of the Fulton County Arts Council. So I want to say thank you to my colleagues on the Arts Council, a few who are here, and also a special thank you to our Board of Commissioners. And please, the way you can say thank you is just reminding them Monday through Friday, 365, that art and culture continues to matter. But a little sidebar note that we are proud about is that, and I say this seriously, is as we go into this 2018 budget, the Board of Commissioners recently approved an extension and an increase in funding for art and culture to ensure that Fulton County can stay culturally diverse. And that is really because all of you, both who live in Fulton County, who work in Fulton County, and of course, who play and spend your money in Fulton County. So we thank you. Also, I want to give a special recognition to someone who's very dear to me. It's been a longtime friend and mentor, and I say one of my many mothers, and that is Ms. Camille Love, who is the Executive Director for the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs for the City of Atlanta. Camille. Another great supporter of art and culture and of Hammonds House Museum, and really has helped to take art and culture to a new level in our city. And so, Camille, we thank you very much and your team. And also, just if my colleagues on the Hammonds House Board of Directors, if you just do a wave, I know some are already here and others are en route. The weather kind of threw us off a little bit, but we want to thank them because we worked them hard. They know that they are not only a fundraising board, but they are a working board. So they may call you for money, but then you may also see them dragging tables to set up for an event. So we thank you for that. And then Lastly, two individuals and an organization that we truly appreciate. One is the Georgia Humanities Council, who is sponsoring today's conversation. So let's give a round of applause for the Georgia Humanities Council. And then last, though we have our government and corporate sponsors for our exhibitions, but oftentimes that doesn't cover all of the costs that we need to make sure that we have the first-in-class exhibitions at Hammonds House Museum. So I want to thank a special couple and very dear friends. And I also like to, I believe, my mother always taught me it takes a village. So my village is very well represented here today. So I want to thank two individuals who gave of their time, their talent, and their dollars to ensure that we could kick off the 30th anniversary right. And those are our sponsors for this wonderful exhibition that we hope that you'll come and see over the next few months. And that is Jay and Arthur Richardson. Thank you all. And last and definitely not least, you see them running around. A special thanks to the incredible, people think about Hammonds House Museum and they think we have the staff that that the Alliance or the other large museums that have. And we have a team of, we say, 3.5 people that keep it running. And those 3.5 people, I say the 0.5 because we have part-time staff and we have part-time staff. And so I really, really do want to just express sincere thanks, appreciation, and a tremendous amount of love to the hard-working team of the Hammonds House Museum, led by Ms. Leatrice Elsie Wright, and thank them. And then last, just thank all of you all for coming. Enjoy, engage, and inspire, and make sure we will see you at the Hammonds House Museum. Have a wonderful event and occasion.
Thank you, Imara. And also, one more thank you. We want to thank our volunteers, because without our volunteers, that 3.5 people would be really crazy. So we want to thank our volunteers. The next person I'm going to bring up, and just kind of let me tell you a little bit. So those of you who have seen the exhibition, we have gotten so much wonderful feedback, and we thank you for that. And we're glad that we have presented something and are exhibiting something that you love. So thank you very much for coming out and providing us with the feedback. When I came aboard last year, and just kind of really thought about this 30th anniversary celebration, and I thought about it in the context of, this year-long celebration and how we need to look back while also looking forward. And so when I thought about us being 30 years old, a lot of artists have come to mind, but the first artist that I called was Carrie Mae Weems. Carrie Mae Weems has had a public, how you just lose that word? That word is gone, but a public career that has really spanned 35 years. So when I think about the Hammonds House and think about Carrie Mae Weems, there's definitely a juxtaposition there. But I also thought about Carrie because Carrie's a friend. When I called her and I said, Carrie, I'm at the Hammonds House Museum now, and we are celebrating our 30th anniversary, and would love for you to kick it off. And Carrie, without a hesitation, said, absolutely. What are the dates? And so, for an artist that is as busy as she is, to be able to just do that, I mean, that really speaks to her generosity, and that is something that when we think about Carrie Mae Weems, those of us who know her, generosity is that word. But to bring Carrie up, I have enlisted another friend. Her name is Halima Taha. So you all may know Halima. She is the author of Collecting African American Art, works on paper and canvas. I've known, Halima just said, we've known each other for a quarter of a century, and I'm like, I'm not that old. So we couldn't have known each other that long, but we have known each other for a really, really long time. And so Halima, I called her and asked her if she would come and celebrate, have this moment with us and celebrate Carrie and to bring Carrie to the stage. And also, Halima is going to be working with the Hammonds House Museum over the next 12 to 18 months, curating a show out of our permanent collection, which is the bomb, to travel around the country. And so that is another reason that it was really important to bring her in town during this time so that we can kick that off as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Halima Taha.
Good afternoon. I love coming to Atlanta. I really do. It is one of my favorite cities to visit, and it's because of all of you, the people here in Atlanta. It's always a pleasure for me to see new and familiar faces together in pursuit of increasing our knowledge about ourselves and the society in which we live in through art, and in particular, the art of Carrie Mae Weems. And it is particularly special and important to me to talk a little bit about Carrie Mae Weems because of the nature of how the collective activity of the art world functions. We've talked, the relationship between artists and dealers and collectors and critics and auction houses and curators, and all of this is essential to propelling an artist into the art world and the marketplace. But it's always the substance and the quality of the work that is important. And one of the things that makes me very proud of someone like Carrie Mae Weems is that in the course of her career, she has always maintained a focus that is based on her own personal integrity and her character and the purposefulness of keeping a tradition that I was taught by Dr. Samela Lewis and Elizabeth Catlett, which is to make sure that whatever you are doing, that you recognize that it's not about you. It's about the work and the culture, and you're a cog in the wheel. And it's very important not to allow ego to trip you up. There are very few artists that have maintained their sense of self and this personal integrity, no matter how successful they become. And I think that that's evident in Carrie's graciousness, her support to many people that you will never know in terms of time, ideas, inspiration, and those kinds of conversations that happen that aren't publicized in the reviews. Those are the important conversations that nurture African diasporic visual culture, nurture the intellectual, cultural, religious, and social diversity of the world, as well as bringing people together towards their greater humanity. So before I even talk a little bit more about Carrie, I really would like us, from our hearts, not just our hands, to just give her heart flutters of just love through fingers. So I will, for some of you who may not be aware of Carrie Mae Weems, Carrie Mae Weems is an American artist whose works with text, fabric, audio, digital images, and installation video, but she's best known for her work in the field of photography. And her professional and creative journey is comprised of many profound experiences and adventures that have left indelible impressions on her psyche. Along the way, she earned degrees from the California Institute of Arts, the University of California, with an MFA in folklore, and the MacArthur Fellowship and the BET Honors Award for the Visual Arts. Throughout her career, she has focused on serious issues, including racism, sexism, politics, social justice, and personal identity. As the Reverend Dr. James Barber talks about the importance of a moral revolution, Carrie Mae Weems makes images that provoke thought and inspire action as a moral force clad in the endless possibilities of her imagination against the backdrop of social consciousness, community building, and leadership. And with that, I introduce Carrie Mae Weems as an artist who is a noun, a verb, and an adjective, and an artist who also, despite her success, has maintained her integrity, her humanity, and generosity of spirit. Carrie Mae Weems.
Oh, I love you. Oh my goodness, that's amazing. I'm just just a working girl. I'm just a working girl. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm home. Halima, Leatrice, Audrey, Ed, who I've known since I was just a young girl, trying to figure out how to work in the world and how to make images and how to do things that might have some sort of meaning. And I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew that I wanted to be deeply engaged in something that had meaning and purpose, and that could be a thread through my life that could anchor it, that would be a lifeline. So I see many friends in the audience, people that I've known for many years, and it's really great to be here in Atlanta, and rare actually for me to be in Atlanta in this way. So thank you very much, and thanks for the warm welcome. Can we bring the house lights down just a little bit up there? Is that possible? What I thought that I would do, because it's Super Bowl Sunday, I don't want to keep you all here all afternoon. I thought that I would kind of walk through a little bit of the work and sort of talk to you a little bit about some of the ideas that I have around the construction of the work and the making of the work and so forth. And then we might see one or two short videos in the end based on some new work that I'm doing. I do a lot of different kinds of work. I'm a pretty busy girl. And one of the things that I really spend a lot of time doing that's really important for me is to really consider what other artists are doing. And I've been doing that from almost the very beginning. I started my life as a photographer looking at and trying to find out what other women were doing in photography and what African Americans were doing in photography. And since there were no books on the subject, with the exception of a very, 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 very few, I actually started going around, touring around the country and collecting and building my own archive on African American photographers and women photographers and other photographers that I was simply interested in. So I've spent a long time doing that. I organize conferences and convenings with artists that I'm interested in bringing in context with one another, situated with one another. I organize concerts as well that I'm interested, music that I'm interested in listening to, relationship to one another, building those kinds of relationships. And the thing that's really wonderful about bringing artists together around very particular subjects. For instance, the one that I just finished was called an examination on the history of violence, how artists respond to notions of violence. You know, artists and musicians and writers and poets and architects and city planners and urban planners and designers. I'm fascinated. It was very, very interesting. And the first thing that sort of, that I knew would happen was that of these, 65, 70 artists that would be in the room together, from 10 in the morning until 10 at night, was that very specific kinds of collaborations would immediately emerge. And that's exactly what happened. So we did it in December at the Park Avenue Armory, and already there are these sort of wonderful buds of ideas that are bubbling up, collaborations that have been made, people that are meeting, and including, collaborations that I'm doing myself with other artists who happen to be there. So I've been doing this kind of work for a really long time, and I really can't help myself. I would rather be shopping, but I just can't help myself, I can't help myself. So I spend a lot of time with a lot of different artists, and I get up fairly early in the morning, and I usually start my day by looking at, reading, considering, contemplating often what other artists are doing, what they're writing. How many artists are in the audience? I have a sense that there are a lot of artists. There are a lot of artists that are in the audience, right? And so this idea about kind of this essay on influence is something that really interests me, right? What is the work that you're doing? How are you making it? What is it based on? What is the content of it? What are you committed to? And then what is it influenced by? And what is the context in which you're situated in? I mean, these sort of ideas are sort of endlessly fascinating to me. So I read people like Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison I read on my knees. I would there were like passages that were so absolutely beautiful, so beautifully crafted, that spoke so profoundly and so beautifully, so deeply, to me. Like that sort of utterance that, it was like, I always felt that way, but I never knew how to say it, right? Just didn't know how to say it, And she'd given me the language, the words to say what I felt. Tolstoy, the power of art to transform us, transfix us. Alice, of course, so important to my thinking. Her fabulous essay, not just the novels, but her essay, In Search of Our Mother's Garden, is one that I come to again and again and again. And the thing that, it seems interesting to me about what artists do, how artists sort of operate in the world, is that we're always kind of worrying the line. Like there's a kind of a fundamental base, right? And you're always coming back to it, right? There are sort of films that you're always endlessly interested in seeing. Right? Books that you're always endlessly interested in reading. Music that you're absolutely fascinated about hearing. You've got to hear it over and over and over and over and over and over again. Right? And you're never tired of it. You're never tired of it. Those ideas are things that I think about often. Very interested in dance. Interested in these sort of ways in which artists collaborate with one another, borrow from one another, underscore one another, propel one another, right? This always this sort of idea. There's absolutely nothing new that's in the world. It's pretty standard, right? The only thing that's different is the way that you're living it, right? The way in which you're experiencing it. But the story is fundamentally the same. She lived, he lived. She died, he died. And in between, right, are some other things, right? Nina Simone's My Way has been a song that I've listened to probably since I was about 16. I listen to it often. It's on my playlist. It's always there. But I'm also interested in the way in which Frank Sinatra sang My Way. I love his version too. And I also love Jimmy Durante's version. And in other talks that I've given recently, I've been sort of really looking at the ways in which artists have been playing with one another. This idea of expressive utterance, how we take something that has been made before, that's been passed down, that has been around for maybe 50 years or 100 years, and make it your own, right? The moment that it comes into your hands, right? And the moment that you put your stamp on it, it becomes your own, right? And that sort of signifying of what is your own, what belongs to you, I think is absolutely important. What delineates you and your making and your marking, right? Can I tell that I'm interested in what I make, right? And what that looks like. And the image tells me constantly that, that actually is Carrie's work. That's her odor. That's her body. That's her sign. Artists have been using their bodies, marking themselves, using their bodies for thousands of years. Individuals, of course, we started by marking our bodies, right? That was our sort of first canvas, right? How we mark this body, how we use it to express, to take on, to layer, to filter, to examine. Martin Fourier's ladder, which I think about often, that great ladder. I don't know if you saw it at the MoMA show, but it was absolutely extraordinary. I'd actually never been to an exhibition of an artist where people literally walked around in circles. They were so entranced. And the guards would say, "Did you see that over there? Sister, did you see that piece over there? You got to go look at that." Right? Men and women that have been working in the museum for years, and suddenly this brother shows up, and they are so grateful. right? And that he transformed something, that he transformed everybody that walked into the space. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. And then people like Felix Gonzalez Torres, who use these beautiful, very simple, elegant red and white beaded curtains to mark the progression of AIDS through his body, and asked you as the viewer to move back and forth through them, right? And the curtains were changing. They were getting either more red or more white as his body sort of progressed, through his disease. A sort of very elegant way of asking us to participate in some sense of what that experience might be. Or somebody like Adrian Piper, who finally, of course, got completely fed up with the United States and simply moved away, lives in Germany now, who did all of these sort of wonderful projects. Maybe she might paint herself, just sort of put a little bit of black paint on her body and then walk down the street and rub up against white people. Right. Doris Salgado, who I actually have a great deal of respect for, we were doing these projects, fascinating. We're the same age, we're born in the same time, same part of the year. And on the same day, we were both doing major projects with various artists, she in Colombia and me in New York, on the history of violence. We had never spoken before, except a month before, when I called her to invite her to participate in my event, when I learned that she was doing her project. This idea about influence, of course, moves across many things, whether it's poetry or literature or dance. Also, in this way, right? A piece by Lorna Simpson, looking at the work of Duchamp, right? Playing with that idea. Or this famous painting by Manet, who is one of my favorite European painters of this time. And this black figure, this black woman in the back. I made my whole series based on her. But most people actually sort of think about Olympia up front. And people have used this again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Hundreds and thousands of paintings are based on this one painting, and this photograph, of course, by Michelin, which also comes out of a series of early paintings. Or this great by Colbert, which I absolutely love. But I didn't know, for instance, that Marcel Duchamp's piece was actually based on that earlier work. But what he does is this sort of bringing the sort of denigration of the body, the sort of denigration of the female form into view. I've worked now on many different kinds of projects, photographic projects and film projects and video projects, and as I said, lecture projects, past tense, future perfect. I keep coming back to that as a kind of theme, past tense, future perfect, and I've just done a piece called Past Tense just last night, actually, which is a performance piece based on the ideas of Antigone. But some of the earlier work, some of the most important work that I've been known for are things like the Kitchen Table series. And it's been interesting. People have used it and marked it in all kinds of ways. It's an image and text piece that I started as a younger woman. It's maybe 30 years old now, I think. It's just about 30 years old, so it's a really old piece, but it's interesting because of the way that it's made, and so that it has all of the trappings, all of the look of documentary photography, but of course it's completely staged. There's simply a series of tableaus, and so the question for me as an artist at that time, as a woman at that time, as a photographer at that time, was to sort of figure out a way of marking the female body and the African American female body in a very different kind of context. So that, there were very important literary theory that had come out, critical theory that had come out, feminist theory that had come out, but none of it seemed to really reference the African American woman or the African American female body, right? And all of my students at that time, primarily the women, were always photographing themselves from the side. And they were always shielding themselves, right? You know, or they were buried or covered up under their hair. There was never a way in which they were squarely facing and confronting the camera, right? Very, very interesting. This inability to really sort of self-identify, to self-describe, and to always be hidden, right? And to sort of further their idea about their own objectification, right? Participating in that. I thought that I needed to sort of address that not only primarily for myself. I needed to address it primarily for myself, but in the making, of course, understanding that I simply represented something that, again, that was much larger than me, that I was a part of a much larger question that needed to be unpacked and investigated and explored. These relationships of family, relationships of women to mother, of women to their girlfriends, of women to men, of women to monogamy, of women to polygamy, right? You know, just really kind of unpacking like the whole idea about what family was, what family meant, and the ways in which women participated actively within sometimes systems that oppress them, and how to challenge that inside of a nuclear family, how to claim voice inside of a nuclear family, how to be independent inside of a nuclear family, how to be independent as a mother and as a woman. For instance, she insisted that what he called domineering was a straitjacket being forced on her because he couldn't stand the thought of the inevitable shift in the balance of power. She assured him that the object of her task was not to control him, but out of necessity, freedom being the appreciation of necessity, to control herself. She went on to tell him that she went on to tell him that in face of the daily force, she understood his misgivings, but they were in a 50-50 thing, equals. She wasn't about to succumb to standards of tradition which denied her a rightful place or voice, period. She was trying to be a good woman, a compadre, a pal, a living doll, and she was working. How could he ask for more? She was really getting tired of him talking out of both sides of his mouth about the kind of woman that he wanted. She said it was time to fish or cut bait. Nona Hendricks, who sang with Patti LaBelle, is actually now using all of this work in making a series of songs about it and producing a performance around this work, which is very exciting. I'm very much looking forward to what she does. And this month, actually, in Essence magazine or Vogue magazine, they use one of these photographs, this one actually, in particular, as a way of talking about women and African American women in beauty. It's in the February issue for any of you that might be interested in picking it up. So this little project that I started making in my kitchen with myself, because I was the only one of the few sisters around in this little town, has emerged into something that, again, was far more complex than anything that I ever imagined that I would actually be doing, or for that matter, even working on. And no matter where I show it, whether I show it in Japan or in Paris or South America, Cuba, men and women are always engaged with it and always interested in it and always find themselves located someplace in it because it's a universal thing, right? This relationship of men and women has been playing out for centuries and centuries and eons. So it was an interesting project to work on. You know, the thing that's interesting about work is that your work really teaches you a great deal about who you are, right? It just teaches you a great deal about who you are. It tells you what you're interested in. It tells you what you care about. It tells you where to go. And if you're really, really smart, most of us aren't most of the time, right? But we try to be. If you're really smart, your process, the effort is to get out of the way of the work, get out of the way of the work so that the work can do the work that it needs to do, right? The work will do the work that it needs to do if you relax, if you pull back, and if you allow, and if you look at it and study it, it will tell you who you are and what you want. And that located, the locus of every work that you produce is already embedded in the work that has just come before it, right? Again, another thing that you learn about your process, right? And that if you're paying attention to your process, it tells you where the work is going, and you simply follow it, right? After kitchen table, and working with people like Robert Mapplethorpe and Robert Colescott, I made these pieces that, again, were sort of looking at these sort of relationships of women and the relationship of women to painting, painting to photography, etc. Standing on shaky ground, I posed myself for critical study, but was no longer certain of the questions to be asked. It was clear I was not Manet's type, and Picasso, who had a way with women, only used me, and Duchamp never even considered me. But it could have been worse. Imagine my fate had de Kooning gotten hold of me. I made these works right after I made this piece with Robert Colescott, seduced by one another yet bound by certain social conventions. You framed me and I framed you, but we were both framed by something larger that we call modernism. And even though we knew better, we continued that time-honored tradition of the artist and his model, right? And the ways that I'm sort of interested in sort of thinking about the ways in which we, participate within our own victimization, I think is really important, that we can be an accomplice in our own victimization. And the way that functions, the way that works, has to be realized, right? And has to be claimed. You have to take responsibility for your role in any relationship, right? What is your role? Who are you in it, right? What is happening to you, and what do you allow to happen to you, right, that you can control, but you decide to cede that control to somebody else? It's something that I'm endlessly fascinated by and interested in. And in this sort of context in which we find ourselves in right now, where 265 young girls were molested by one single doctor for 20 years, is absolutely phenomenal. For 20 goddamn years, this motherfucker did this shit. Right? Right? Now, at some point, culpability is there. And you have to claim it. You have to deal with it, right? There has to be a reason. There's a time when you have to stand up. And certainly people, some young girls said, no. You're not going to get away with this. That was important, that voice, right? And the moment she spoke out, all these other voices stepped out with her. But it took one brave person to say, no, I will not allow you to violate me. And then we have a situation like this. From here, I saw what happened, and I cried, which is being shown right now at Hammonds House. Leatrice, thank you so much for bringing this work here. I don't think it's ever been here in Atlanta. These are really important works, and fascinating things have happened around this body of work. Really fascinating things. You became a scientific profile, a Negroid type, an anthropological debate, and a photographic subject. Now, the piece goes on for another 25, 30 images. I'm just sort of showing these four. And I think many of you have seen the exhibition. Yeah, many of you. Some of you have. Okay, just some of you have. So please try to get over to Hammonds House to have a look at it. So these four photographs are really sort of important, and they kind of speak to also just what we were talking about before. How are you accomplice, or how are you a victim, right? And are you in circumstances beyond your control, yes or no, right? So these photographs, these 4 photographs are owned by Harvard University. And this idea about influence, this idea about appropriation, about how we use and borrow and bring forth other materials, which artists have been doing for thousands of years and will continue to do, right? You know, Nina will sing My Way, and Sinatra will sing My Way, and I'll sing My Way and sound really, really bad. But we'll engage. So these photographs I saw for the first time when I was pretty young, maybe about 30 or so. And I saw them in a publication magazine. And then, often institutions commission me to do projects, which is sort of great because I do projects that I would be doing anyway, but I get paid, which I really like. The Getty Museum, the J. Paul Getty Museum in California was really interested in a body of work. There was a man by the name of Jackie Wilson, for those of you who are really interested in photography, Jackie Wilson. And Jackie Wilson had amassed this really extraordinary collection of daguerreotypes of African-American subjects. Like he had like this amazing body of them. Maybe he had over 200, 250 of them. The J. Paul Getty Museum was going to do an exhibition about these daguerreotypes, and they had brought in Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson had actually brought the images to the Getty, you know, one of the most sophisticated and advanced and richest museums in the world. Like that kind of institution, right? So they have like the money to acquire everything. And they wanted these images. They really desperately wanted Jackie Wilson's images. They wanted him to see them to the museum, because then the Getty would also have this sort of phenomenal, essential body of photographs that was extremely rare. It was called Hidden Witness. And then they asked me to participate. They asked me to do a response exhibition to the Jackie Wilson exhibition. The same space, the same museum, the same time. So Jackie had the front half and I had the back half. It was really pretty fascinating. And I worked on this piece. And learned a lot and really looked at a lot of daguerreotypes, used some of Jackie Wilson's daguerreotypes in my piece, and these pieces from Harvard in my piece, and many, many other things. And the thing that I was sort of interested in was, in this piece, was sort of telling the story of African-American history, through the use of photographs, right? Just simply through the use of photographs. Like, what could I say about African-American history in this very tight, almost sort of haiku-like way? Right? I mean, even in this sort of set of photographs, you became a scientific profile, a Negroid type, an anthropological debate, and a photographic subject. Right? I mean, like right there, it's like all this information. It's like just chock-packed full of information to be unpacked and to be explored in all kinds of ways. And so I was thinking about doing this for the entire piece. I think it worked fairly well. In the process of doing the piece, I looked at early daguerreotypes. I looked at photographs and photographers from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and into the 80s. So sort of expanding this time. And then I had these conversations. So the Getty, I'm the first living artist that the J. Paul Getty Museum had ever worked with. I'm the first. And so it was this sort of an anomaly. And I was really the first again because they really wanted these photographs. They really wanted this brother's photographs. In the process of making the piece, I was invited by the educations department. Really, they were the ones that really commissioned me to do the piece. And then I, used photographs by people by Robert Frank and Gary Winogrand and all these people, these very, very famous and well-known photographers, many of whom I had a great deal of admiration for. And I knew that I didn't really need their permission because I was working in an educational context, but I wanted their permission because I admired them. So the first thing that happened was that Harvard called me around about these photographs, these particular photographs. And I'll just say this and then we'll move on. Harvard called me about these photographs, and they said, well, you don't have a right to use them. We own them. And I said, oh, really? Well, that's interesting. You own them. So I thought, well, so they said, and if you continue using them, then we're going to sue you. And I thought, really? And I was sort of shaken, right? It's, you know, Harvard's a huge institution, very, very wealthy, and I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I thought, you know, I have to stand my moral ground, because I'm not going to allow this institution to tell me that I can't use the images of slaves. I'm just not going to allow that to happen. So I think maybe, and because I also had a sense of maybe what my rights might be, that I really needed to sort of really check myself, and I thought, okay, I think that you should sue me. I think that that's a really good idea. Right? Because I thought that we would have this like really great conversation in public, that we would talk about some of the seminal images that had been made, that Harvard had actually commissioned right in the 19th century to prove that African Americans were actually subhuman, that we could have that debate, right? That would be fabulous, right? And then we could have also an issue around copyright, who owns what and under what circumstances does ownership sort of gets breached, and what moral authority might one have in the process of really sort of excavating this work and really angling it in a different way and sort of giving sort of the humanity and the subject back their humanity. Maybe that might be interesting to explore. So Harvard said, well, So then they said, okay. They said, okay. Anytime you sell these photographs, you have to give us 20%. I said, really? Okay. So that was the deal. Anytime you sell these photographs, you have to give us 20%. And I said, this is great. Okay, I'll go for that. And then they bought them. So now they exist in Harvard's archives. Right? So this is complicated. Crazy, crazy story, right? And then I had another great, great conversation with the famous photographer, Robert Frank. And Robert Frank did a great book called The Americans. And, again, a book that, I have never taught photography without showing these photographs. Like I show them in the same breath that I might show something by Roy DeCarava or by Gordon Parks. I mean, they must be seen. They're like the standard. It's like like showing, listening to, profound jazz from like the 50s and not doing, or providing, some sample of Take the A Train. It would be like inappropriate and rude. And so he had photographed, beautiful photograph, that I actually one day had the chance of stealing out of a gallery, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Beautiful photograph of a maid. I think it was actually taken in Atlanta. I think it was taken in Atlanta, of a black woman holding a white baby. Great, great picture, right? Baby holding on to this woman like this is mama for real. So I used this photograph, put really beautiful text under it. And Robert Frank called Robert, and he said, well, I don't want you to use it. And I said, well, why? He said, well, because I don't. And so we had a 5-hour conversation. I remember standing in the middle of the floor at like 6 o'clock in the morning saying, you've got to be out of your mind. So I said, okay. You don't want me to use it. But let me ask you this. Did she want her photograph taken? Did she give you permission? I know that you've made hundreds of thousands of dollars off this photograph over the years. Did she sign a model release? Right? I mean, there are all of these kinds of questions. Right? I mean, we just had this brilliant conversation. The thing that was really amazing was that he never hung up the phone, and neither did I. We were screaming at one another, but we did not get off the phone because it really, in the end of the day, he knew that I was asking him something that he really needed to have, like, better answers for, but he didn't. Right? It was really fascinating. So to end this, and I hope some of you get a chance to see it, this piece has been written about many, many times, from many perspectives. Lawyers have written about it. Art historians have written about it. There's a new book that's coming out by Harvard University Press that, centers around them. There's a lot of material that's really sort of been generated. There were reporters from the New Yorker that wanted to write about it. There were reporters from the New York Times that wanted to write about it. There were people that wanted to kick Harvard's ass who wanted to write about it. I mean, it was just like all of this it was like the stirring the pot of any number of really sort of fascinating issues. And so it was really an important work. And again, I have learned a great deal about myself in the process of making this kind of work. Often dealing with ideas about color. I come back to color, notions of color constantly in the work. The colored people grid, the blue grids, the blue boys, the blue black boys, the high yellow girls, the purple girls, the jet black boys. I mean, right, I'm always looking at and thinking about and theorizing color in some kind of way. Things that exist behind color, things that rest behind color. It's a way of simply working, and I keep mining it. I keep coming back to it again and again and again. I also keep coming back to sort of ideas about architecture, the power of architecture to describe, to inform. When I went to West Africa after coming from the Sea Islands, I just knew that I had to go to Africa. I knew that I needed to look at the slave coast. I knew that I needed to understand something about that amazing architecture, right? The sort of architectures of slavery, grabbing, snatching, blink, and you be gone. Right? And then I also wanted to look at these other ideas around architecture. Architecture buildings inform us in all kinds of brilliant and extraordinary ways. And I look, it's like, wait a minute. What? What is this? This is a woman's body. This is a woman's body. What? That's what? And so I kept going. It's like you start to understand that architecture is really informing who belongs in a place. And you experience it every day. Right? You're walking down the street, and you know whether or not that space is meant for you or not. Right? It's inscribed. It's a skim that informs you. And so, and again, just looking and trying to process, trying to understand what I was seeing has been absolutely important. The sexual role of architecture, the gender roles of architecture, the power of architecture, the threat of architecture. Right, the threat of material culture and the ways in which people build things around them to inscribe and to inform us, I think is really important. I pay a lot of attention to it. And I've been looking at it for a very long time. When I went to Rome, I received the Rome Prize maybe 10 years ago. It was wonderful. I had always thought that I was going to go to Rome, but I thought that, I had watched Gidget Goes to Rome as a little girl. Gidget Goes to Rome. I imagined myself, speeding through, Rome on the back of a little Vespa, some badass dress. Sleeping my way across Italy. But then I didn't go until I was 60, so it was over. By then it was all over. But then I could actually work. So I got like an amazing amount of work done. And I knew that by that point, I knew that I really wanted to go to Italy because I wanted to do two things. I wanted to make a film in Cinecittà, which I did. Cinecittà is a great, famous Italian studio where many of the Italian filmmakers like Fellini made their work. I wanted to make a film in that space, and I did. It was really fabulous. And I wanted to also look at a place where power and money and empire all sort of came together, right? Developed really in Rome. Developed in Rome in this very particular way. And so I wanted to move through these ancient squares and use my skin, my body as a site for bearing witness to the power of architecture and the role of that architecture was playing at the service of the state, and how the individual was made to feel in relationship to that architecture. And so not only was I interested in ancient Rome, but also in fascist Rome, in Mussolini's Rome, which is something that we also usually don't think about when we think about Italy, right? We think about, fascism in Germany, but we don't think about fascism in Italy. And the way in which architecture worked in that space became very important to me, and I made many, 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 many photographs around it. I got up every morning, and I went out for months and months and months, just really mapping all over the city. I went to the 13 gates of the city. I photographed every single gate, every entry point, and so forth, and all of the major bridges. And it was a great, great, great project. And so just as I was finishing up this project, as I was saying before, if you get out of the way of the work tells you where it needs to go, what it wants to be. The last photograph I made, I arrived in Italy in August, and I left in June. And the last photograph I made was this photograph of the National Museum in Italy, in Rome. And the moment I stood in front of this great museum, it occurred to me that I really needed to photograph museums, right? And our relationship to museums, and who's in museums and who's outside of museums. What do museums inscribe? What do they inform? And who's shown in them? And who isn't shown in them? And why aren't they shown in them? And Halima, of course, is doing this sort of important work around, artists in the marketplace, and artists and money and meaning, right? And art and power and all that shit, And so I thought that I really wanted to just go look at and stand in front of these buildings that have really determined what we understand to be fine art, that we are not in, right? And the same sort of like these ideas about work, sort of like the same attitudes that sort of kept us rooted to work in the historical past are the same ideas that sort of keep us out of work in the contemporary future, right? It's the same thing with art. The same thing, the same way in which we've been kept out of the art world, we've also been kept out of ideas about modern practices in the arts, right? So we do Negro work. We do something else. We don't do work that is considered mainstream. We don't do work that is considered modern. We don't do work that is considered contemporary. We do Negro work, right? And it's priced according then to Negro work. So I thought I needed to go stand in front of these places, and I just did. I sort of threw a toothpaste, some toothbrush and a couple of pair of panties and a suitcase and just hit the road, and just spent a lot of time photographing and looking at these museums. I think maybe just a month on the road of just photographing and flying into every city that I possibly could in order to really look at these institutions and the ways in which they're constructed. And they're beautiful, beautiful, beautiful buildings as well. And then I thought that I should look also then at the monuments here in the United States and in Washington. And I've just finished another project on monuments as well. So this work has, kept me, very, very busy and deeply engaged. A project that I made here, that I showed here actually for the National Black Arts Festival a number of years ago around constructing history. And that, that we have arrived at this sort of incredible moment in our time that we are living through Donald Trump is sort of an extraordinary thing. It's an extraordinary thing. And it seems to me that one of the things that I really need to think about in making this piece called Constructed History, I really wanted to think about the way in which we had arrived at our historical moment. And that it seemed to me that there was a part of these sort of incredible assassinations that had taken place. We sort of think about assassinations happening, like in South America, in corrupt South America, in corrupt China, in corrupt places, right? But all of the assassinations that happened in the 60s completely formulates who we are, right? The assassination of Martin and Malcolm, right? Of Medgar, and on and on and on, right? The assassination of the Kennedy brothers, Right? Robert Kennedy knew that he was going to be assassinated. He knew that he was a sacrificial lamb, right? And when his brother John was killed, he called Hoover to say, what did you do to my brother? That's the level of corruption that we were dealing with even then, right? Where we were wiping them out. Maybe somebody will wipe out Trump. So, I had this amazing dream, and I've been working on this project about grace. It's called Grace Notes, and I just really could not answer this question, about what is grace? What is grace? What is it? Right? What is it? And I would ask you, what is grace? What does it mean? Is it can we talk about it outside of a kind of religious context? Is there something about a quality that we can get at? And I've been asking myself this question for a while, even as I was working on this project on Grace Notes. And these are other pieces from scenes and takes. I've been standing at movie sites, like Empire and How to Get Away with Murder and Scandal, thinking about contemporary culture. So I use my body a lot to get around and to mark things and to mark sites, and again, sort of playing with these ideas of who we are and who are we becoming as a sort of industry. The industry, popular culture, sort of swirls around. So we have like this great space in the world of music, and something else is starting to sort of happen in the world of TV and film for the first time. We're seeing one another regularly. I mean, when I was a kid, if you saw like a black person on a commercial, everybody ran to the TV set. I mean, it was like that rare. I mean, it was just incredible, And now it's like, oh, what's that? I don't know. But there's some, sort of, phenomenal things that are going on. So this work, I'm actually just going to sort of jump forward because we don't have a lot of time. So I started doing this project on grace and asking these questions about what it was and talking with lots of people about what it was, and I called my pastor, called my friends, and talk to people that I didn't know, just asking them about the meaning of this, and then I was thinking about the Emanuel 9, and thinking about the assassination of all these young boys, the murder of all these young boys, murder of all these young boys, men and young girls. It happening at this moment in our lives in this particular way, and that nobody has been charged for these crimes is sort of extraordinary. It's really extraordinary. And not only that, that there's been this sort of onslaught against the black body, the sort of pressure that's placed on the black body, but the way in which the black body has resisted that pressure has been something that's really important and really important. And so I was really trying to figure out, who I was in relationship to these young boys, and how to make something about their lives, and how to, again, sort of, reinforce the human dimension, the human cost of these tragedies. These are real lives. It's not a statistic. It's my daughter's friends and my cousin's friends. They're scared to go outside. I thought I just really need to sort of figure out how to deal with this. And one night, I went to bed, and I had this dream. I had this dream that there was this wall of water, this massive tsunami that was coming. And I saw this thing coming, and I thought, oh my God, wow, right? And I'm running, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna die. This is it. And I've got to get away. I've got to save myself, but I've got to save my friends. I have to save my friends. I have to save the people that I care about. And so I started running. And I ran in one direction, and I looked over, and there was Trump leering at me. I thought in my dream, motherfucker. And I ran past him, away from this water. And I ran towards a ladder. And Martin Fourier's ladder, the ladder that I showed you earlier, was jetting up, way up into the sky. And all of my friends were climbing it. And as they climbed it, they were singing, "We're climbing Jacob's ladder." And I thought about Michelle Obama when she said, when they go low, we go high. And it was just this amazing thing. This dream sort of shook me out of my seat. And out of my sleep, in the middle of the night, I ran outside to the moonlight, and I stood there howling like a mad woman. And grateful. That, yeah, there is a tsunami that's coming, and we're in it, and we can feel it. But that we can move to higher ground, that there are places for us to go, and that a part of the way in which we negotiate where we go and how we go is to really engage and to participate in the deepest way we can with our lives and with our work and with our families and with the things that we care about. And so I decided that I would make this play, Grace Notes Reflections on Now, is a way of really sort of looking at and thinking about and theorizing the sort of moment in which we live. I asked a group of amazing musicians to work with me, people like James Newton and Craig Harris, who've participated in the National Black Arts Festival here, Francesca Harper, Amani Azuri, Issa Davis, Alicia Moran, great singers, young boys and steppers from various groups. And every time I move to another city, I bring in those groups of people, of young people, and then we do a kind of commemorating to all of the fallen and all of these young people that have lost their lives in the process of simply trying to live. And so I thought that maybe I would just end with one small video, if you don't mind. Is that okay? I think that this is, we performed this actually last night at the Living Together Festival in Miami. And I think I'll read a little bit of the text. I'm not sure if it's there or not. Language has been very important to me, even though I don't consider myself a very good writer. I get a chance to express certain things about words and qualities that are rejected my own knowledge and I deceived myself by refusing to believe that any of this was possible. And so their rights were denied, and the people said little, and they did even less. This violence was not like in the movies. There were no fast cuts, no zooms, no pans, no close-ups, no fades. Reality happens in slow motion and in somber color. The man was rejected. The woman was denied. And the numbers tell the story. He was a father, a brother, an uncle, a cousin. He was 22. He was 36. He was 25. He was 43. A son. Father, a brother, an uncle, a husband. He was 22. He was 43. He was 27. He was 29. He was 41. A brother, an uncle, a cousin, a father, he was 34, he was 18, he was 29, she was 25, she was 31, a daughter, a mother, a wife.
He was trying to get out his ID and his wallet out his pocket, and the officer just shot him in his arm. We're waiting for a back. I will, sir. No worries. I will. He just shot his arm off.
Told him not to reach, friend. I told him to get his hand out.
You told him to get his ID, sir, and his driver's license. Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead. Please don't tell me my boyfriend just went like that.
Keep your hands where they are.
Yes, I will, sir. I'll keep my hands where they are. Please don't tell me this, Lord. Please, Jesus, don't tell me that he's gone. Please don't tell me that he's gone. Please, officer, don't tell me that you just did this to him.
They were no strangers to sorrow. Time and time again, the man was rejected and the woman was denied. For reasons unknown, they were always stopped, always charged, always convicted. A man was killed. His body lay in the open, uncovered, and exposed. Women wailed, and men moaned. For reasons unknown, I saw him running. I saw him stop. I saw him turn with raised hands. I heard a shot. I saw him fall. reasons unknown, for some reason, I rejected my own knowledge. I deceived myself by refusing to believe that any of this was even possible. And so their rights were denied, and the people said little, and they did even less. The man was rejected. The woman was denied. A man was killed. The body lay in the open, uncovered and exposed. Women wailed, and men moaned. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you, Liz. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Gorgeous.
And now you understand why this is one of the most significant artists of our time and why we love Carrie Mae Weems so much. So we are going to take a couple of questions. We don't really have time for a lot of questions, but we do have time for a few questions. Excuse me? Can't hear me. Okay, I'm sorry. Can everyone hear me? Okay, so we have time for a few questions. But before we do that, I do want to, once again, I want to thank Carrie. I'd like to thank our sponsors and our supporters. I'd like to thank our members because members really, really help to drive this organization. And so each of you, when you came in, you received a membership brochure. We'd really like for you to consider becoming a member of the Hammonds House Museum. If you would like to see more of this type of work and more of these type of presentations, your membership helps us do that. And without it, we kind of struggle, and so many organizations are struggling right now to just keep the doors open, and we need that support. That support is a vote of support for us. It is encouragement for us, but also you help keep an institution humming. You help us keep good work on the walls. You help us keep cultural programming, continuing, and you do that through your membership. So we have a sustaining program. You can pay us like you pay Netflix, $5 a month. And that would really help us out, and we know that those are dollars that we can count on each year, because keeping a museum open is not easy work. Keeping that 3.5 staff employed, not easy work. So please, just really consider becoming a member. So Ravi has turned on microphone. Can you test it for me, please?
Test.
Fantastic. And remember, the show will be up through April 29th. So if you have not already seen it, I know a lot of people in the room have already seen the show because I've seen you there. But if you have not seen it, you have until April 29th to check it out. But see it sooner than later, and see it often, and bring friends. So does anyone have any questions? So you can go to either of those microphones. Excuse me? Okay, well, please project. Carrie, can you?
Yes. We are moving around. We're traveling around with it. Actually, we're starting a tour next spring. So I would love to bring it to Atlanta. We've also done it in a couple of different variations. And the first variation is called Grace Notes, Reflections on Now. And the second variation is called past tense, using this sort of, language as a kind of, double entendre. So, and it's a smaller, more concise piece, and it's easier actually to travel than Grace Notes. But we did do it last night. It was really it was really quite wonderful, even if I say so myself. I mean, the singing, you know, Alicia Moran, I mean, these are extraordinary performers, and the music is just really, really special. So we would love to bring it to Atlanta, absolutely. We miss the National Black Arts Festival. I miss it very, very much. And I came here for 20 years to the National Black Arts Festival almost every year. The only time I was ever in the doghouse with my husband is when I couldn't leave the National Black Arts Festival. Right? Every day I would call and say, I've got to stay one more day. And finally he said, maybe you need to just go on and stay down there. Oh, yes, Miss.
Hi, I had a question about being a young photographer and trying to figure out how to get out of the monotony of full-time.
I'm sorry, speak into the mic.
Oh,
I can't
can you
quite hear
hear
you.
me?
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Speak a little louder.
Okay. So I was just curious if you had any suggestions for a young photographer getting out of the monotony of working full-time and trying to figure out how to make new work. Because I actually wrote about, from here I saw what happened and I cried.
Oh, you did?
I wrote about it in my thesis when I graduated from my BFA program at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design.
Oh, great. Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So it was a huge inspiration, and
Uh-huh.
the body of work I created for my thesis, was incredible. And now I'm trying to figure out how to make
How to work.
else.
How to work. You know, for anybody serious in doing what they do, you have to go to your work. You have to go to your studio. You have to go to your space of production every day.
Right.
Inspiration doesn't come from the bolt. It comes because you're working. It comes because you're there and waiting and mapping and playing and right. You have to go and you have to work every day, right? Whether it means that you have to get up a couple of hours early, or you go to bed a couple of hours later, or you don't go out to that dinner party, whatever it is, right? But you have to make. I think you absolutely have to make time for the work, and I think it's also very important. And this is probably the most difficult thing, is that you have to begin to really examine and come to terms with what you are committed to, what you care about, what gets you up in the morning, what drives you, what motivates you, right? You have to discover that. Like one of the things I came to discover, but I came to it in a weird way, sort of late, is that, yes, I am interested in sort of ideas about performance. Yes, I am interested in ideas about identity. Yes, I am interested in ideas about class. But I'm fundamentally interested in constructions of power. That is really my focus. And it always has been. And everything really spins around that thing. That is the thing that I'm interested in. And a part of sort of coming to realize that was not simply through a sort of intellectual process. It was really through a deep examination of my own production and what I do. And so I think that that's really it's an important thing. It's not a light thing at all. I think it's a very, very serious question. But making that time to work. There's a great book by Virginia Woolf called A Room of One's Own, which I read long, long ago, and it became like also another little Bible for me, that you really do have to have a space for yourself to work in that belongs to you and nobody else but you. It's your chair. And going to that space, to that creative space every day, even if you're there for 10 minutes, really matters. It really matters to me. And when I can't do it, I get really upset.
Yeah.
So work on that.
Okay.
Yes, and good luck.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So I really appreciate you saying just the statement and advice to get out of the way of the work, which is something that resonated with me throughout your entire talk. So I recall reading an interview with David Hammonds about him saying he strives to make work that isn't reactionary. And something that I see with your work is I see that you're able to take this anger, take this this sadness, and you're able to manifest this in ways that are transformative with this violence and with this history that we have, even most recent history with even the video that you showed at the very end. And I'm somebody that's let that anger get in the way of my work a lot, and that sadness and that sort of depression keep me from making work. I wonder, do you have advice for? I know it's a kind of
No, I understand that. I understand. No.
It's something that
I understand the question.
Yeah. How do you not?
You know, I have. You know, living with somebody like me is really not easy. I really do salute my husband. Living with me is not easy because I'm a pretty intense person. But the thing that I'm interested in, I really am interested in having, I'm really interested in having like a really deep dialogue with self. Right? Like really looking at my stuff, you know, and really unpacking it. And I don't necessarily have to share it with everybody, but I need to look at it for me. I need to really sort of know that, you know. But I am interested in having a conversation through the work, right? And a kind of reflection, a kind of, you know, moral reflection and personal reflection and communal reflection in the work. And I think that one of the ways that you do that is when you're able to step back out of the way of the work, right? The anger can be there, the pathos can be there, the sadness can be there, the disruption can be there, but the work can't be, quote, disrupted. You have to allow people to walk into it and to find themselves in it, right? And that's the space in that you start to control the work, right? You know, because I'm interested in having people come close to the work. And the only way they can come close to the work is if they see themselves and not just your anger.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And this is something that I think is really quite important for us and for contemporary artists and for people that have lived under the pressure that we've lived under. Yeah. You know? I mean, David, I think, is, you know, I'm always so angry that I didn't make that stuff that he makes. You know what I mean? He's just such a great artist. He's a great artist. You know, so powerful. You know, I mean, he's the only brother that I know who could sell snowballs in the snow.
Yeah.
Ma'am?
I really enjoyed your talk, and I really enjoyed the part about marking the space with your body. The pictures of this Empire set and the Scandal set that you were standing on. And most recently, I was watching She's Gotta Have It on the Netflix series. And now that the office space, that the therapist has your prints. And I wanted to ask you, just curious about that space and what Spike Lee was trying to do with marking the space and using some of your work to do it.
Yeah, you know, I was so surprised, you know. I mean, it was really an honor to have Spike want it, you know. I mean, you know, She's Gotta Have It was such a breakout for all of us of a certain age, right? I mean, it was just such an amazing, you know, I came out of the theater just beaming, right? You know, I was just so hardened by seeing black people in a certain kind of way that I'd never seen black people in this way before. It was wonderful. You know, so for Spike to come back to me years later and to want to incorporate my that work from the Kitchen Table series in his project is a deep honor. It's a deep honor to be marked in that kind of way, and to have the work ring in that kind of way. Because at a certain point, really is true, the work simply becomes so much bigger than you are. Right? Kitchen Table belongs in a way to the world that has taken it in, right? I was simply a conduit for the making of it, but it belongs to the world that has embraced it, and that's exciting. You know, it was wonderful to see it in Vogue the other day, just sort of flipping through and, you know, coming upon this image. They have to pay me for that. Yes, sir.
Building off of that anger, I know we see across this country, we're seeing hyper-active capitalism at work, and we're seeing our cities being gentrified. So building off of the work of Rick Lowe, Theaster Gates,
Yes.
Mark Bradford.
Yes, yes, yes.
I'm from Nashville, Tennessee,
Oh, okay.
and it's hypercharged. The city has went into just disarray, and black people are being marginalized, and they're taking the urban centers and the places all around the historically black colleges and universities. I know you have a particular interest in that type of work. So what do we do to, because when you had the pictures up about architecture and who belongs in those spaces,
Yes.
and you can see from the outside who belongs in those spaces and what happens in those spaces. So build more on that, because I'm all about creating like sacred spaces and safe spaces for us, and I call them like barbershops, nail salons, beauty shops, because that's the only place we can go and we can talk shop and really be ourselves. We can go to those other places that are being gentrified, but we don't really feel comfortable there. We might just can afford it, but we don't have those places for us. So what do we do in this situation here?
Well, you know something, I felt sort of differently. I feel like every place is for me. I mean, I really do. I feel very comfortable in my skin in the world. I will not be intimidated, right? My tax dollars matter. I pay a lot of taxes, right? And so I think that, you know, my sense is rather, you know, how do I think about my participation, how I think about for instance, my participation in something like the Museum of Modern Art. How do I think about my participation in the Guggenheim, right? So when I was given an exhibition there, I thought, okay, let me use this opportunity, not simply for me, you know, as selfish as I am, right? But I'm going to bring in another 150 artists over the course of 5 days, from 10 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, right? To completely change and completely reactivate this space and to give the museum a sense of what its responsibilities should be to a larger community and to many, many artists that they had never even considered, didn't even know about, didn't even know about them, right? And so that, for me, is a way of working. You know, going into spaces and establishing new sort of terrain within those spaces. We belong in those spaces, right? We have to have those spaces. And let me tell you this, those spaces need you too. And in a few years, as this country becomes, you know, moving from white to black and varying shades of brown, this is critical. And all of these institutions are looking at themselves right now saying, oh, shit. How are we going to negotiate and deal with this new reality? Because it is coming. And in a few years, it's going to change. We will be the minority, the majorities, all over the country. And certainly on the perimeter of the country in all the major cities. And so some very interesting things are happening. I adore Theaster. I've worked with Theaster. I've worked with Mark. I've worked with Rick. I do my own project in Syracuse, New York, working with kids. Of course, I understand that idea about space and safe space. I completely get that. And I do my kind of work in that kind of way. It's very important to me. I have my own little nonprofit. It's called Social Studies 101, where I train kids in the ways that I think they should be trained. But the thing that I love about my dad, my father, you know, my first memory is of my father picking me up and sitting me on his knee and saying, remember that you have a right. And that if anybody messes with you, pick up the biggest stick you can and beat them with it. And that stick can come in all kinds of forms. So anyway, you just keep working and knowing that you belong and that we have to feel comfortable and safe wherever we are. I often find myself being the only black person in a room. And I'm not intimidated by that fact. I'm just sort of like, wow, really? Okay, and then I think we'll wrap it up and go, do you have a question? And then over here? Okay.
First, I want to thank you most profoundly for enriching our lives with your words and your work. You asked for a definition of the word grace.
Thank you.
Amazing grace. The definition that I have, I'm borrowing from the Bard. I'm borrowing from the Bard. Forgive my South Georgia accent. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth like a gentle rain from heaven. Upon the earth beneath it is twice blessed. And this is the key part. It blesses him that gives and him that takes.
Yes.
Bless you.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've been thinking that, yes, this idea that you've just sort of shared, that I think that if I think of us as a collective people, that we've been bent but not broken, right? Shaken but not destroyed. And that the extraordinary thing, the remarkable thing that I find about who we are as a people is our ability to offer up, even within the midst of the storm, to offer and to give and to share the breath of one's humanity and to say that I recognize that in you. And I give that to you. Right? I mean, I think this idea of giving, right? That I give you my respect of your humanness. It's just an extraordinary thing, right? And that we can carry that, in part because of who we are, because of our historical circumstance. We can carry that. And I think it's remarkable. And that, to me, I think is, as my mama would say, just this extraordinary compassion to give unconditionally, love in all places. My sister?
Hi, Miss Carrie Mae Weems. How are you? Can you
Good
hear me?
afternoon.
I'm Diamond. I love you, and thank you for being everything I've ever dreamed of. Like, you are on my bucket list to meet. And so, so I can check it out. So I actually saw your work for the first time when I was watching Black Girls Rock. And yeah, so I'm young. But I remember seeing the Kitchen Table series, and I said, I want to do something like that. I want to create something like that and curate something like that and have these images in galleries and museums. So I do want to be a curator.
Oh, you want to be a curator?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And so you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you built your own archive.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to know who were some of the African-American women or who inspired you the most to start the archive?
Who helped me start?
Who helped you start? Who did you research? Who inspired you?
I started with researching a group that I'd known that Ed Spriggs knows all about. I started with people like, for instance, the Black Photographers Annual. Mm. Joe Crawford had made that book. And through that book, then I found out about all these other photographers, from whether it was Buford Smith or Roy D. Carava, Azure Cowan. Ming Smith was one of the only women who was a part of the Kamoinge workshop. Then what I did, I didn't have any money at the time. And so every time I got some money, I made flyers. I made a bunch of flyers, and I would call people. I probably called Ed, who was at the Studio Museum at the time, and asked about the photographers that he knew. And I called people that, I was just bold. And I would send out flyers. I'm looking for African-American women photographers. I want to know what you're doing, right? Please send me your slides. And slowly but surely, materials just started to sort of trickle in. And so that was sort of like the beginning. Of course, the great person that I met during that time, from the flyer that I sent into the wild, was the great Deborah Willis. And I put her in her first exhibition, right? So, people like that. And then, of course, I went to visit P.H. Polk For those of you who know photography, Pope was in Alabama. He had been in Tuskegee, and I saw a couple of his photographs, and I just had to go meet this man, and somehow I made my way from New York down to Alabama to his little house, and knocked on his door, and he invited me in and took me fishing. Then he took me upstairs. This is a great story. He took me upstairs to his dark room. I remember it was very hot, so it was very close to summer, maybe it was like maybe June. It was very hot, and his dark room was upstairs in the top of his house. And so it was like 100 degrees up there, right? And you walked up there, this great photographer, P.H. Pope, and there were hundreds of photographs everywhere, stacked everywhere, negatives everywhere, right? It was stunning. You know, it was remarkable, and it was also painful because I'm an organizer, and so I just wanted to stay and just organize it all, you know? So then I did the hard thing. I said, Mr. Pope, I'd like to own a couple of your photographs, if I could, you know. So, and of course, I'm a student, I don't have any money. So I said, well, so how much are they? And he said, well, you can have one for 13 or two for 25. And I got really mad. Do you know what I mean? This great photographer. Now, I didn't buy them. 5. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Oh, that was great.
Thank you. And I told you that we'd make membership easy for you, so if you would want to become a member, Audrey is outside at the registration desk, and she will take your membership if you'd like to join today.
Absolutely.
I know it's Sunday. I sound like the preacher, so please join. And thank you all so much for coming. This warms our heart to see so many people come out to support this fantastic artist, so thank you so much. Have a good evening.